This is Philip Martin. This is take 7 of OnFilm on video for February 4th, 2022. It should be, if the weather people are telling us the truth, it should be really cold and nasty today. So, I hope you're home and hope you're safe. Hope you have power, Wi-Fi, and that you're able to actually watch a movie, somehow. And like I said, when we used to live up on the hill in Hillcrest, we used to go down to Riverdale on days like this because if the theater was open, and yeah, usually it is, it's a good day to kind of snug in and watch a movie. Now, you may not want to do that. That's fine. You may not feel comfortable going out to theaters, even though, as far as I know, there's never been one of these outbreaks that have been linked to a theater. And you do have the seats that are far apart, and you do have everybody facing forward, and people are wearing masks and all that. So it's probably better to go there than Target, but I'm not telling you what to do. Besides, it might be so cold and miserable, it's all shut down anyway. What I want to talk about today was I finally got around to showing A Face in the Crowd, Elia Kazan's 1957 movie that was filmed partly. Actually, a lot of it was filmed in Arkansas in Piggott in 1957 to my Life Quest class. And I go back just to this a little bit. We've had a lot of technical problems with trying to show movies over Zoom. I think I figured it out. I couldn't show A Face in the Crowd last year, but I figured it out, and I was able to show it this year, so hooray for me. I might be totally defeated by my attempts this week, and if I am, well, then, you win Zoom, but I got him once time. Now, Kazan's an interesting guy, and he's regarded by a lot of people as kind of a villain, But he's also one of the great American directors. I mean, and he has a really kind of short season window there between 1945 and 1957. He directed 10 movies, all of them critically acclaimed. He won Academy Awards, Best Director for Gentleman's Agreement and On the Waterfront, 1947, 1954, respectively. He's twice named Best Director, A Streetcar Named Desire, in 1951, East of Eden, 1955. He directed two of the most profound and influential Broadway dramas in history, Tennessee Williams' Streetcar Named Desire, and Arthur Miller's Death of the Salesman, 1948. He had a 1967 novel, The Arrangement, that became a bestseller. He was co-founder of the Actors Studio, and which led him to practically discover two of the most important film stars of all time, Marlon Brando and James Dean, and sort of is one of the people that's responsible for that sort of method, gritty, naturalist school of film acting, which isn't really realistic, and I'll talk more about that later. But they sort of paved the way for these muttering, vulnerable leading men. Carol Baker was also part of that, Baby Doll, in 1956. So Kazan's a giant, not as a purely creative force, but as a facilitator and talent scout. And nobody has had more impact on the way American drama looks and sounds than Elia Kazan, who most folks remember as a rat. In April 1952, he went to Washington. He named names before the House Un-American Activities Committee at the height of McCarthyism. And he not only acknowledged his brief membership in the Communist Party, he gave names of 8 other members he knew from his days in New York's group theater, including playwright Clifford Odets, the author of, what was the author of? Waiting for Lefty. He wasn't just an informant. The FBI knew the names, already knew these names. The point of having him as a fear was to certify him as work-worthy. This was so Kazan could get his own credential back. If he named names, he could continue to work. If he didn't, who knows? Maybe not. Took him a while. His first appearance, he said he joined the party. He refused to implicate others. The ultimate test of the credibility of a witness is the extent to which he is willing to cooperate with the committee, giving full details, not only to the place of activities, but also the names of those who participated with him in the Communist Party. That's what a member of the committee said in 1951. That was their purpose. They were not there just to get you to mea culpa, confess, but to, name your co-conspirators. And they weren't going to let you off unless they did that. So Kazan basically gave them the names of people they already knew. And you can argue whether that's, the morality of that. I mean, it's sort of like, I'm not sure that anybody's life was ruined by Kazan, but he certainly wasn't a profile in courage. By cooperating with committee, he cleared the way, though, for them to blacklist people. If he had held out, if everybody had held out, if nobody had named names, there would have been no blacklist. People remembered that for the rest of his life. He died in 2003. He was given a special honorary Oscar in 1999. And there was a huge uproar. He was denounced again. That was very controversial. That was pushed through by Carl Malden, who was one of the actors that he, quote, discovered and promoted and worked in, I think, 5 or 6 of his films. Kazan never apologized for going before the committee and naming names. And after he did it, he took out an ad in the New York Times to justify himself. He denounced communists as a dangerous and alien conspiracy and urged liberals to speak out. Then he comes back and in his memoir later, he excoriated the House Un-American kid and the pageant of degradation, he called it. But he says he never felt like he did the wrong thing. And he says that even though he kind of regretted placing that ad, he then became the target of a well-organized campaign, branding my act as shameful. Okay, well, maybe it was shameful. Some people still believe it's shameful. But here's Kazan. I still believe what I'd done was correct, and no matter that my reasons have been sincerely founded and carefully thought out, there was something indecent in what I had done and something murky in my motivations. What self-concerns were hidden in the fine talk, however powerful a role my love of filmmaking had played in it, what I'd done. I felt unresolved, alternatively humiliated and resentful of those who criticized him. He's feeling like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done it, but, I had to keep making movies. No one who did what I did, no matter what his reasons, came out of it undamaged. I did not. Yet the truth is that within a year, I stopped feeling guilty or even embarrassed about what I had done. That was the final word Kazan had on it. I'd rather, look at the substance of his work than the unknowable, sounding of his heart. If he was unapologetic, his experience with the committee kept resurfacing on his films. In On the Waterfront, who was scripted by Bud Schulberg, who also cooperated with HUAC and went on to write A Face in the Crowd, which is the film I showed my Life Quest class last Friday. They made this hero of the punch-drunk fighter turned stool pigeon, Terry Malloy, Marlon Brando. On the Waterfront's an interesting film. It's got this Christian symbolism as well as a barely disguised critique of the American Communist Party methods of discipline. Brando's a longshoreman who could have been a contender had not his older brother Rod Steiger convinced him to go down for the short money for dumping fights. So Brando stands up to the mob that controls Hoboken docks and is beaten up. But yet he holds on, eventually rallying the rank and file against the crooked, corrupt bosses. All right. this was not the true story. The true story that it was based on actually ended different. Kazan and Schulberg, made their Terry Malloy successful, where the real guy wasn't. The mobsters and the union bosses prevailed. But, this is America. And in face, an interesting film that ought to be seen a lot. I think this is one of those. I mean, it's got a component where it's an Arkansas film because it was filmed largely in Piggott and some in Memphis and some in Pocahontas, or some in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. But aside from that, it's set in Arkansas. And the main character, Larry Lonesome Rhodes, Andy Griffith, in his film debut, 31 years old, as was Patricia Neal. I think they're both 31 years old in this film. He's an Arkansan. She's an Arkansan, and she works for a little radio station, and he's in the jail, the drunk tank in Piggott, Arkansas. And she finds him and does this interview with him for her program, A Face in the Crowd. He sings this song. He becomes a sensation, sort of. They put him on the radio there locally. Pretty soon he's in Memphis. He's starting to deal with sponsors. He's becoming popular. He is this charismatic, media figure. He goes to New York. He's co-opted by this conservative politician who has him consult with a senator who's going to run for president. He puts it's astute and it's over the top. But if you remade it now, there are things that you would go further with, because it wouldn't just be that Lonesome Rhodes would be the power behind the throne. He wouldn't be the consultant. He would be the candidate himself, And the way that the audience, identifies with him is really interesting because, sort of they think that he's, one of them, one of us. It's very tribal. But anyway, today, if you made it, Patricia Neal would be a podcaster, and Andy Griffith would be the candidate. And you couldn't end it the same way, because the way it ends, spoiler alert, is that Lonesome Rhodes' whole career crashes down after she opens the microphones and lets some of his his off-the-air speech go out over the air. And as soon as people hear it, they go, "Oh, God, he's not what we thought he was. He's a monster. Boo, hiss." Which we know doesn't happen. We know that if that happened, what they would do, people would rationalize, well, he's telling the truth. He's using, this language that we don't like, but he's telling the truth. And he's not talking about me anyway. He's talking about this other contingent that is really very stupid and really doesn't know how to act and behave and needs him to tell them. So let's get behind this guy. He's a straight shooter. So it couldn't end the same way. But it would be an interesting, movie to take on again. And I do think that something like Bob Roberts, the film that Tim Robbins did, that is hardly ever seen anymore. I mean, I think Tim Robbins probably feels guilty about that because his critique was so close. I think it was almost like a roadmap for people. And I think that's one of the reasons that you don't see it as often. I know Tim Robbins didn't want the music for that to be widely disseminated because people would take it in the wrong way. They wouldn't receive it ironically. They'd receive, this land is my land. This land's not your land. They would receive that, just unironically. Just say, yeah, that's the way it is. Anyway. So, you got A Face in the Crowd, even East of Eden, which is James Dean's first role. So you got to give Kazan credit at least for Brando and Dean and Andy Griffith and Carol Baker finding these actors, and all of whom have this sort of American method, technique, which is, again, it's a little bit overwrought, especially to modern sensibilities. I mean, Andy Griffith's performance in A Face in the Crowd is risible. I mean, it's just, yeah, evil, but you have to understand it's a break with that sort of theatrical, declamatory style that you see in the 30s and even into the 40s. It's becoming more naturalistic. It's not naturalistic, this sort of method thing. You see the same thing James Dean and, East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause, especially, is the one where James Dean is so histrionic. But these things evolve. I mean, we all get better. I mean, let's hope we're all better than we were, 50, 60, 70 years ago. But anyway. But Kazan, it's sort of, I like his movies. And I like East of Eden. I played, I was in a stage version of it. I played Cal, the good brother, right? It's just, it's really part of this sort of Americana. And I was listening to a podcast, and I'm not going to remember it. And if I could remember it, I wouldn't tell you the name of it anyway. And these guys are probably fine guys, but they came across as two 30-something smart-ass would-be screenwriters. And they were talking about, Facing the Crowd. And they just totally missed the whole point of the movie. And they sort of were talking about, well, it's only realistic when it's in Arkansas and Memphis because those people might have gotten behind this demagogue guy, but there's no way once he goes to New York, and, most people are just going to go, who's this bumpkin? We don't like him. And they even use the word podunk, which is one of my favorite, kind of, it's usually the people who are podunk who identify as podunk, and it's sort of like we have this sort of inferiority complex. I mean, I see it all the time. Even people who I know and like, and will say, well, how come we can't do that? It's just Arkansas. It drives me nuts. But these guys, God, it was terrible, and they just totally missed the whole point of the movie. But they would have given it maybe a C- or C+ or something like that. It's not. It's a great American film, and it's a film that you have to make allowances for the fact that it's as old as it is. It's mid-century, and it has this sort of almost expressionistic sort of style to it. It's a very punchy kind of noir style. And at the end, there's this wonderful speech by Walter Matthau, where he tells Lonesome Rhodes his future. He tells him exactly what's going to happen to him. And it's not the worst future, but it's not the best. It's never, ever going to be the way it was. It's not going to be the same as when you were coming up, as when you had these people. There's going to be somebody else. Because that's the nature of the medium. It's a fickle nature, and it doesn't really, really matter what your idea is, what the intellectual content is. Because it's all going to change anyway. Because people are going to get bored, and they're going to move on.